You keep reaching forward, but the shift you're waiting for has always been forming behind you. Not in the past, not in memory, but in the quiet place you usually don't look, because it doesn't feel like doing. It feels like stopping just enough to notice what's already responding. There's a small cost to always moving first, a subtle friction you've learned to call normal, effort that never quite lands where you expect it to. A sense that you're pushing on a door that should open, yet somehow resists, as if it were meant to be pulled. And you don't make a story out of it. You just adapt. You keep going. But somewhere in you, there's a recognition that something in the order is off. Not wrong, just reversed. In the first few seconds of a day, before thought organizes itself, before identity puts its clothes back on, there's a fleeting clarity, a soft awareness that doesn't chase, doesn't plan, doesn't prove. It simply notices. And in that noticing, life feels closer, more intimate, almost responsive. Then the mind steps in and rearranges everything into sequence. Cause, then effect. Effort, then result. Be more, do more, try harder, and maybe the world will meet you halfway. Yet what you keep sensing, quietly, persistently, is that the meeting point isn't ahead of you. It's already here. It's just waiting for you to stop approaching it, like a destination. There's a pattern you've lived inside for so long it feels like gravity. You assume movement creates alignment, that action creates clarity, that pushing forward creates opening. But sometimes the opening only happens when the pushing softens. Not because you give up, not because you retreat, but because you finally feel the direction of the current instead of swimming across it. Between 10 seconds and 40, you start to realize this isn't about information. It's about recognition, about something you've already felt in moments you couldn't explain, like when everything suddenly worked without strain, when timing aligned without force, when the right words came without searching, when a choice felt obvious before the reasons appeared. Those moments didn't come from effort. They came from a quiet internal alignment that happened first, and only later showed itself as outer movement. It's subtle, so subtle that the mind usually takes credit for it after the fact. Between 40 seconds and 2 minutes, something else becomes familiar. The sense that you've been trying to reach states of clarity that only appear when you stop reaching. Trying to become versions of yourself that only emerge when you stop constructing. You've noticed this in small ways. When you're not trying to be confident, you suddenly are. When you're not chasing connection, it arrives. When you stop forcing understanding, it unfolds. Not dramatically, quietly. As if reality responds to your inner posture, more than your outer motion. And maybe you've felt the tension here, because the world teaches sequence. Step 1, then step 2. Cause, then effect. Control, then outcome. But your lived experience keeps whispering something different. That effect often precedes cause, at least internally. That alignment comes before action. That perception sets the tone long before circumstance appears. You don't articulate it this way. You just feel that sometimes life answers a question you haven't consciously asked yet, as if a version of you already knew what direction you were turning toward. There's a gentle promise hidden in this, not a promise of reward, a promise of coherence, that if you listen to the order that already exists beneath your effort, things begin to arrange themselves with less resistance, not magically, naturally. And as this unfolds, you may start to sense that consciousness itself doesn't move the way you were taught time moves. It doesn't go forward in straight lines. It doesn't build in steps. It resonates. It aligns. It reflects. The outer world seems to mirror what the inner field is already holding, not what it hopes to get, but what it quietly assumes is real. That assumption is rarely verbal. It lives as identity, as posture, as the way you inhabit a moment before you interpret it. Here's where a small micro-loop opens. You think you're acting to create a feeling, but the feeling is often what creates the action. You think you're choosing a path, but the path often reveals the version of you that was already choosing. You think time is leading you, but sometimes it feels like time is answering you. And then the question arises, softly, without words. What if the order you've been using isn't wrong, just inverted? Not in a way that demands correction, in a way that invites recognition. At around 3 minutes, there's a quiet sense that something deeper will clarify later, not because it's hidden, but because it unfolds in layers, the way perception does when it's ready to notice itself. So for now, you simply stay with the feeling. You stay with the observation that effort doesn't always lead to alignment, but alignment almost always leads to effortless movement. You've seen it in others. You've felt it in yourself during rare, unguarded moments, a decision that came fully formed, a shift that happened before you understood it, a sense of course, that replaced what if. Those moments didn't come from pushing forward. They came from settling into a different internal orientation, almost as if reality doesn't respond to where you're going, but to where you're standing inside yourself. Every 60 to 90 seconds, the mind wants to reassert control. It wants to organize, define, label. So let it notice this instead. You're not being led through an idea. You're being mirrored by one, not told what to think, just reminded of what you've already sensed. There's a version of you that moves first, then feels, and another that feels first, then moves. One strains, the other flows. One tries to become, the other allows what already is to reveal itself. Neither is wrong, but only one feels like home. As the narrative deepens, you might recognize something else. That suffering never felt like punishment. It felt like misalignment, like wearing a suit cut for someone else's shape, like walking a path that looked right but didn't resonate. And the moment you stopped forcing yourself into it, life didn't collapse, it rearranged quietly, often in ways you couldn't have planned, as if there are parallel versions of you, each already living different alignments. And your awareness simply shifts which one you're perceiving from, not traveling, tuning, not choosing from options, recognizing which state feels coherent. This isn't taught, it's remembered, and somewhere in that remembering, you sense that forgetting was never a mistake. It was part of the design, to experience contrast, to experience effort, to experience the illusion of pushing against a silent field that was always reflecting you. At around 10 minutes, another soft retention moment appears, not as a promise, but as a feeling that the layers are still unfolding and that what seems abstract now will later feel personally obvious. You don't rush it, you let it simmer. You notice how identity isn't fixed, it's a frequency, a posture of awareness. When that posture shifts, circumstances follow, not as reward, but as mirror. You've lived this, a change in self-image, and suddenly different opportunities appear. A shift in expectation, and people respond differently. A new sense of worth and boundaries naturally form. You didn't force those changes, you became them, and the field responded. Not because the universe is testing you, but because it's reflecting you. There's a difference between chasing a future and aligning with a version of yourself that already feels complete in the present. One creates tension, the other creates coherence, and coherence has a strange way of reorganizing time. Moments line up, conversations arrive, insights land without struggle, not because you summoned them, but because you were already in the state that perceives them. This is where the sense of reverse order becomes almost tangible. You don't become aligned after things work. Things work when you're aligned. You don't find your path and then feel like yourself. You feel like yourself, and the path reveals itself. You don't create meaning and then feel peace. Peace lets meaning show up. Again, not as a lesson, as a lived pattern. You might gently reflect on this without trying to solve it. Where in your life did clarity come before explanation? Where did knowing arrive before evidence, not as memory, as sensation? The body remembers alignment even when the mind doubts it. The nervous system relaxes into it. Breath deepens. Time softens. It feels like being supported from beneath instead of pushed from behind. And somewhere in this recognition, the idea of a field becomes less abstract. Not a concept, a felt continuity, a background of awareness in which thoughts, choices, identities, and timelines all arise. You're not trying to control it. You're learning to notice how you're already participating in it. The way you assume, the way you expect, the way you quietly decide who you are before the world answers. There are versions of you that live in effort and versions that live in alignment. You don't move between them by doing more. You shift by being differently, not pretending, not visualizing, simply recognizing which state feels true. In a way, this is what the idea of parallel realities has always pointed toward, not as fantasy, but as inner orientation. Different perspectives, different outcomes, all available in the same moment, depending on which version of yourself you're identifying as. Not chosen by force, by resonance. Around 20 minutes, another soft anchoring line appears internally, a sense that the deeper coherence of all this will become clearer as the layers continue to unfold, not now, but naturally, in your own timing. You don't need to grasp it. You're already inside it. Every cognitive reset gently reminds you you're not being led forward. You're being allowed to notice what's already moving. You might even sense how collective awareness is quietly shifting, not through noise. Through subtle individual recognitions like this one, people questioning effort, questioning struggle, questioning whether growth really has to feel like pushing uphill, not rejecting action, just reordering it, letting perception lead, letting alignment precede motion, letting identity settle before outcome. There's a quiet dignity in this, a sense that you don't have to prove your way into coherence. You only have to stop arguing with it, and as the final minutes unfold, nothing is concluded. Because this isn't a conclusion, it's a continuation, a subtle echo that will keep moving inside you after the words stop. You may notice later today a pause before a decision, a moment of stillness before reaction, a sense of, wait, something is already clear here. That's not new, that's familiar. It's the part of you that was never moving in the wrong direction, only starting from the wrong side of the sequence, not doing, then being, but being, and letting doing arise from there. Not seeking, then finding, but recognizing and realizing it was already here. And as this awareness continues to unfold, you won't feel like something ended. You'll feel like something quietly began, not in time but in perception. The conversation doesn't stop, it simply turns inward, and somewhere, without trying to define it, you may sense that the order you once trusted is gently rearranging itself, not to correct you, but to reflect you. There's a moment, usually small, when you realize effort isn't the same as movement. You can be doing everything and still feel like nothing is actually shifting, not stuck, just suspended, like you're running in place inside your own life. You follow the sequence you were taught. Think first, plan, push, adjust, try again, and sometimes it works, on the surface. But underneath, there's a quiet sense that the change you're looking for isn't responding to how hard you're trying. It's responding to something subtler, something you're already broadcasting without noticing. The way you expect, the way you wait, the way you assume how things will go before they even start. That inner posture moves first, long before action, long before choice, long before time seems to advance. You felt this when you walked into a room already bracing yourself, and the room somehow met you with that same tension. You felt it when you were calm without a reason, and suddenly everything around you softened too. No logic connects these moments, but coherence does. It's as if the field of experience doesn't respond to what you want, but to what you're being aligned with. Not what you say you want, what you quietly assume is real. And this is where the strange reversal begins to make itself felt. You think perception follows reality, that you see what happens, then you feel what it means. But in lived experience, it often unfolds the other way around. You feel the tone first. Then reality arranges itself to match, not as a reward, as a reflection. This isn't about optimism, it's about orientation. The inner yes or no that happens before thought, the subtle leaning of awareness toward or away from a version of yourself. Every choice carries that leaning, every expectation too, every sense of identity. And identity is not a story, it's a frequency of self-recognition. I am someone who struggles. I am someone who waits. I am someone who arrives too late. I am someone who things work out for. These are not beliefs, they are positions in the field. From each position, a different world appears, not because the world changes, because the mirror angle does, and you don't move the mirror by force, you shift where you're standing. That shift rarely feels dramatic. It feels like a quiet, internal click, like something settling into place. Suddenly you're not trying to convince life, you're simply present inside a different version of yourself. And then things respond, not in fireworks, in timing, in ease, in the absence of resistance that used to feel normal. You might notice this in conversation. When you're seeking approval, words tangle. When you're grounded in yourself, words flow. The topic didn't change, the posture did. You might notice it in opportunity. When you're chasing, doors hesitate. When you're aligned, openings feel almost casual, not lucky, coherent, as if the path recognizes the version of you walking it. There's a reason this feels familiar, even if you've never named it, because you've lived in both orders. You've tried to change how you feel by changing circumstances, and you've watched circumstances change after how you felt shifted. One is exhausting, the other is quietly powerful. One says, "When this happens, then I'll be okay." The other says nothing at all, and somehow okayness appears first, not forced, not performed, recognized. And once recognized, the outer world seems to rearrange itself around that recognition, not to please you, to mirror you. This is where time begins to feel less linear, because sometimes the effect shows up before the cause you can point to. You meet the person before you know why. You make the choice before you know how. You feel certain before the reasons assemble. The mind calls it intuition, but it's deeper than that. It's alignment catching up with itself across layers, as if a version of you already made the turn, and awareness is simply following, not traveling, tuning. And when you tune, the station changes. Same world, different signal. You don't create the music, you adjust the dial, and suddenly the silence you thought you were in reveals it was always full. This is not about control, it's about correspondence. The inner field and the outer field are not separate. They are the same movement, seen from different sides. One side feels like intention, the other feels like event. One feels like awareness, the other feels like time, but they are synchronized in a way that doesn't obey the order you learned. You don't become ready after things line up. Things line up when you're ready, not because you earned it, because you're finally standing in the version of yourself that matches what's appearing. And somewhere in you, this doesn't sound new. It sounds remembered. There's a quiet moment, often overlooked, when you realize that what you call waiting is actually a form of listening. Not listening with your ears, listening with your whole sense of self. It happens in between decisions, in the space after effort and before outcome, in that thin layer of time where nothing seems to be happening, yet something is clearly rearranging itself. You may have felt it when you stopped trying to figure things out, and clarity appeared on its own, not as an answer, as a state, a calm that didn't depend on resolution, a knowing that didn't need proof. And in that state, the world felt different, not because it changed, but because you did. Your perceptions softened, your expectations loosened, your sense of identity became less rigid, and with that shift, the way reality responded also changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. It's as if the field you're moving through isn't passive, it's relational, not reacting to your actions, but resonating with your internal position. You don't push a river, you align with its flow, and when you do, movement feels effortless. Not because you stopped moving, but because you stopped moving against. This is where the idea of trying begins to feel strange. Trying implies distance. Trying implies lack. Trying implies that what you want is somewhere else, in some other moment, in some other version of you. But what if the distance is an illusion created by sequence? What if what you call future is simply a different orientation of the same present, a parallel expression of the same field, already existing, already coherent, already complete, and your awareness doesn't travel to it, it aligns with it. This is why certain choices feel heavy and others feel obvious. Not because one is right and the other is wrong, but because one matches the version of you you're currently tuned to. You felt this when you forced a decision that looked perfect on paper, and something in you quietly resisted, and you felt it when a path made no logical sense. Yet your whole being leaned toward it without explanation. That leaning is not desire, it's recognition, a resonance between who you are being and what you are about to experience. And this resonance often appears before circumstances justify it, before evidence, before validation, before time catches up. This is the reversal you keep sensing. The feeling comes first, the form comes later, the inner alignment appears first, the outer confirmation follows. Not as a reward, as an echo. You don't become confident because things work out. Things begin to work out when you are quietly confident. Not the loud kind, the settled kind. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind that doesn't wait for permission. It's simply present. And presence is powerful in a way effort never is, because presence doesn't try to move the field. It is the field, localized as you. When you rest in that, even briefly, the sense of time shifts. Minutes feel spacious, decisions feel lighter. The pressure to become something dissolves into the recognition that you already are something, and that something is already moving. Not forward, not backward. Sideways, perhaps? Across versions, across probabilities, across subtle branches of self. And this is where the idea of parallel realities stops being abstract. You notice how a small shift in mood creates a completely different day, how a slight change in self-perception leads to entirely different interactions, how one inner yes opens doors that 1,000 outer efforts couldn't. You didn't change the world. You changed the angle from which you experienced it. Like rotating a mirror just enough for the light to hit differently. Same light, different reflection. This is also why suffering often feels like friction, not punishment. Like you're out of phase with your own movement, like you're insisting on a rhythm that your deeper self has already outgrown. You push. The field resists, you relax. The resistance dissolves. Not because the field gave in, but because you stopped pushing against yourself. There's a version of you that is always in alignment. Not perfect, not finished, but coherent. And there are versions that are slightly out of sync, trying to live a story that no longer fits. The discomfort isn't a message of failure. It's a signal of misalignment. Not saying you're wrong, saying you've shifted, but the mind prefers linear explanations. It wants cause and effect, step and result, effort and payoff, so when coherence arrives without struggle, it feels undeserved. When timing aligns without force, it feels like luck. When clarity appears without searching, it feels mysterious. But maybe it's simply natural. Maybe this is the default state, and effort is the deviation. Maybe ease isn't something you reach. Maybe it's something you return to, a baseline of being that doesn't strain against the moment. From that baseline, movement still happens. Choices still happen. Actions still happen. But they arise rather than being pushed. Like breath. You don't try to breathe. Breathing happens. And when you interfere, it becomes labored. Life may work the same way. When you interfere with its rhythm, you feel tension. When you allow its rhythm, you feel carried. Not controlled. Carried. This doesn't remove responsibility. It deepens it. Because now responsibility isn't about forcing outcomes. It's about noticing alignment. Not what should I do, but from which version of myself am I doing this? The same action from two different inner positions produces two entirely different realities. One feels like struggle, the other feels like timing. One feels like chasing, the other feels like arriving. And this arriving often happens before the place appears. You arrive internally, and the place forms around you. That's the order your nervous system seems to recognize, even if your mind resists it. You can feel it when something is right long before you can explain why. You can feel when something is off, even when it looks perfect. That feeling is not irrational. It's pre-rational. It's awareness responding to alignment. And awareness moves faster than thought, faster than time in a way. It doesn't wait for the story to catch up. This is why certain moments feel like déjà vu, not because you lived them before, but because a version of you already resonated with them. The experience arrives, and your system says, yes, this matches. Not this is new, but this is familiar. Familiar not as memory, familiar as frequency, as if you're stepping into a reality that was already prepared by the state you were in before you recognized it. This preparation isn't conscious. It's the quiet, constant tuning of identity, who you believe you are, what you assume is possible, how you expect to be met by the world. These aren't thoughts, they're orientations. And orientations determine which version of reality you perceive, not by force, by resonance. This is why trying to change your life often feels exhausting, because you're attempting to rearrange reflections without adjusting the mirror. You move the furniture in the image, but the angle of the glass stays the same, so the pattern repeats, until sometimes you get tired enough to stop rearranging, and you simply look. You notice how you're standing, how you're breathing, how you're waiting. You notice the subtle tension you carry, even in rest, the subtle leaning toward the future, as if the present isn't quite enough. And when that leaning softens, something inside you straightens, not emotionally, existentially, a sense of I am here that doesn't reach forward. And in that, the world feels closer, not because it moved, because the distance collapsed. The future stops being a place you're trying to get to and becomes a quality you're already embodying. And from that embodiment, events begin to organize themselves, not in a straight line, in a pattern that feels strangely personal, as if reality isn't random, but intimate, as if it's always answering. But you were listening from the wrong side of the conversation, not asking, projecting, not receiving, anticipating. And when you stop anticipating, you start noticing small synchronies, soft openings, unforced connections. They don't shout, they whisper, they don't convince, they confirm. And slowly, without needing to name it, you begin to sense that what you thought was effort was actually interference, and what you thought was waiting was actually alignment, not passive, receptive, not empty, poised, a readiness that doesn't lean forward, a presence that allows the next moment to arrive already shaped. This is not an ending, it's a deepening, because once you feel this order, you can't unfeel it. You may still try, you may still push, you may still forget, but something in you will remember, and it will keep recognizing the difference between movement that strains and movement that flows, between paths that require constant justification and paths that simply feel coherent, between versions of you that are trying to become and versions that are quietly being. And as this recognition settles, the sense of reversal becomes more than an idea. It becomes a lived orientation, not something you apply, something you notice, not a technique. A remembering, and this remembering doesn't rush to finish its thought, it keeps unfolding. There is a kind of silence that isn't empty. It's full, but not loud, present, but not demanding. You usually touch it when you're not trying to get anywhere. Maybe late at night, maybe in the shower, maybe in the few seconds before sleep when the mind loosens its grip and the sense of me becomes softer, wider, less defined. In those moments, you're not chasing your life, you're inside it. And strangely, everything feels closer, not emotionally, existentially, as if the distance between you and the next moment collapses and time becomes less like a road and more like a surface you're already standing on. This is where the idea of sequence begins to feel optional. Not wrong, just one way of arranging experience. You start to sense that what you call before and after are more like perspectives than positions. That something in you already knows the next step before the step appears. Not as prediction, as alignment. You felt this when you suddenly knew it was time to leave something. A job, a relationship, a version of yourself. No argument, no drama, just a quiet inner shift. And after that shift, the outer circumstances rearranged, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once, but always in a way that seemed to follow a decision you didn't remember consciously making. As if the choice happened first, and the explanation came later. The mind prefers to believe it leads, but your experience keeps suggesting it often follows. Following awareness, following identity, following a deeper sense of where I am that isn't located in space. This is where the idea of self becomes less solid, not as philosophy, as feeling. You notice that who you are isn't fixed. It's a state, a way of inhabiting the moment. And that state has gravity. It pulls certain experiences toward it, certain people, certain paths, certain outcomes, not because you deserve them, not because you attract them, because they match, like water finding its level, like sound finding its resonance. You don't command the echo, you create the tone. And the echo answers, sometimes quickly, sometimes with a delay that makes it feel like coincidence. But when you look back, you see the pattern. The version of you that was anxious lived in a world that confirmed anxiety. The version of you that was guarded met guardedness. The version of you that softened began to encounter softness. Not perfectly, not constantly, but enough to notice. Enough to feel that reality isn't random, it's relational. Not personal in an emotional sense, personal in an identity sense. It relates to who you are being, not to what you are demanding. This is why effort can feel so strange. Because effort assumes separation. It assumes here I am and there is what I want. It assumes a gap that must be crossed. But alignment dissolves the gap, not by moving across it, but by realizing you were never on the other side. You were just oriented in a way that made it seem so. Like standing with your back to a window and insisting the room is dark until you turn and realize the light was always there. The turning is not an action, it's a reorientation. And once it happens, the room doesn't need to be convinced to be bright. It simply is. This is how certain insights arrive, not as conclusions, as shifts in angle. You don't learn them, you recognize them, and recognition has a different texture than understanding. Understanding feels mental, recognition feels bodily. It settles in the chest, in the breath, in the way your shoulders drop without a reason. It feels like something finally lines up, not intellectually, existentially, as if the inner field you're standing in suddenly matches the outer field you're looking at, and in that match there is relief, not excitement. Relief, the relief of no longer pushing against the current, the relief of no longer trying to make the mirror change instead of your position in front of it. This doesn't make life perfect, it makes it coherent. You still experience contrast, you still experience loss, you still experience uncertainty, but they no longer feel like obstacles to alignment. They feel like movements within it, like waves within water, not signs that the ocean is wrong. And this coherence changes how you relate to time. The future stops being a goal and becomes a direction of unfolding. The past stops being a cause and becomes a memory of previous alignments. The present becomes the only place where tuning actually happens, not through force, through honesty. Honesty about what you're actually feeling. Honesty about what version of yourself you're inhabiting. Honesty about where you're resisting and where you're allowing. This honesty isn't moral, it's perceptual. It's simply noticing your inner posture. Are you leaning? Are you bracing? Are you open? Are you withdrawn? Each posture corresponds to a different experience of reality, not metaphorically, directly. Because the field of experience responds to posture the way a surface responds to pressure. Press here, and it gives there. Shift your weight, and the balance changes everywhere. And when you become sensitive to this, life begins to feel less like a series of problems to solve, and more like a conversation of states. Not spoken, felt. You sense when something is out of phase. Not wrong, just not matching who you are becoming. You sense when something is in phase. Not perfect, just resonant. And resonance has a quality of inevitability, not destiny. Fit, like a note that belongs in a chord. It doesn't force itself in. It simply completes the sound. This is how certain encounters feel. You meet someone and there's no story yet, but something in you says, this fits. You arrive at a place, and without reason, it feels like home. You consider a path and without logic it feels aligned. The mind comes later and builds explanations, but the recognition happened first. Again and again, the order reveals itself. Inner coherence, then outer arrangement, inner shift, then visible change. Not as cause and effect in time, as two expressions of the same movement, seen from different sides. And when you rest in this understanding, not as a concept, but as a lived sensitivity, something else softens. The urgency to control. Because you begin to feel that control was never really about shaping the world. It was about trying to feel safe inside yourself. And safety, real safety, doesn't come from predicting the next moment. It comes from trusting your alignment with it. Not trusting outcomes, trusting your ability to meet whatever aligns with the version of you you are becoming. That trust is quiet. It doesn't announce itself as confidence. It feels like steadiness, like standing on ground that doesn't shake when the scenery changes. And from that steadiness, movement becomes cleaner. Decisions become simpler. Not easier, simpler. Less layered with fear, less entangled with proving, more direct, more honest. You don't need to know where the whole path leads. You only need to recognize the version of yourself that is stepping, because that version carries its own reality with it, not as baggage, as context, and context shapes meaning. The same event can feel like loss from one context, and like release from another. The same silence can feel like emptiness or like space. The same pause can feel like delay or like timing. Nothing changed but your orientation. This is why awakening, in the quiet sense, doesn't feel like gaining something. It feels like stopping something. Stopping the constant attempt to outrun your own present state. Stopping the insistence that the next moment must be different for you to be okay. Stopping the belief that alignment is ahead of you rather than already beneath you. And when that stopping happens, even briefly, there is a strange sense of being supported, not emotionally, structurally, as if the field of reality itself is holding you in a way effort never could. Not carrying you toward a goal, but holding you in coherence. And coherence has its own movement. It doesn't rush, it doesn't stall, it unfolds. You can feel it when you stop trying to time your life, when you let moments arrive without leaning into them, when you let choices emerge instead of forcing them. There is a different rhythm there, not slow, not fast, accurate, like a heartbeat that doesn't need to be counted. You live inside it whether you notice it or not. But when you do notice it, something relaxes. You're no longer trying to make the universe respond in the right order. You're sensing the order that is already there and allowing yourself to move with it, not ahead of it, not against it, with it. And this with is subtle. It doesn't feel like surrender in the dramatic sense. It feels like cooperation, as if you and the field are not separate participants, but two sides of one process. Awareness and form, identity and reflection, position and appearance. And somewhere in that cooperation, the old idea of trying to get life right dissolves, because you begin to feel that life isn't a problem to solve. It's a relationship to align with, not a task, a resonance. And resonance doesn't demand effort. It requires tuning, not by turning knobs, by listening to the way your body tightens or opens, listening to the way your thoughts rush or settle, listening to the way certain possibilities feel heavy and others feel strangely light. Not light as in easy, light as in unburdened by inner contradiction. Those are the moments when the order feels right, even if nothing happened yet, because the real shift already did. And the outer world, as it always does, will answer in its own timing, not because you made it, because you matched it. And this matching continues, not toward an ending, toward deeper coherence, not toward a conclusion, toward a more subtle listening, as if the conversation between you and reality never really stops. It only becomes quieter, more intimate, more precise.